It's about not being quiet about how you feel. Which is good advice if I don't say so myself. I try to let you get in just to see a tiny piece of my mind. And you've barely scratched the surface, but you're running on a clock that's running out of time. With the darkest of intentions and these quiet interventions shut me down. So I'll stay here in the shadows, unafraid to unmask the things that might cause you to drown. I'm never gonna be quiet. You seem to only want a well-paid silence. That's fine, but I know you're working from a clock until you pull the gun and cocked it down. My only option is they stop, dropping, or I can just throw up. Baby, constantly saying I'll go up. Now hold up, I'm done telling you my story, but tell the next one and I said hello.
There's a late 19th century French novelist named Léon Blois who wrote a book called A Woman Who Was Poor. And one of the statements he made in that book was, or one of the statements he is quoted as having made in his life is that there's only one sorrow, the sorrow of not being a saint. Now, the context in which he said that didn't have anything to do with people with halos or people who were so holy that they're not somebody we could attempt to strive to be like in our lives. What the context of that statement was is the sorrow is that people miss the mark, that they're not whole. Holiness is wholeness, that you don't become the person you were meant to be. That you go through your life, you're born, you go through your life, and you die, and you never become the person that you were meant to be. That of all the people who have ever lived, you're the only one like you. The poet says, what I do is me, for that I came. That I came. I came into this world to be me. And so the question is, who am I?
This is the classic Maslow pyramid. We all have these needs. So physiological, the basic needs for physical survival, including food, water, livable environment, clothing, shelter. And then safety, protection, and security, feeling and being safe from harm, from family members, strangers, or occupational hazards. And this is really, really a very strong need. It's very important. And then there is, of course, belongingness and love. Membership of families, school communities, community groups, gangs, I'm not so sure about because, but definitely membership of culture, being accepted, feeling seen, feeling heard, being able to be who you are and not judged for that. Then, of course, love from family, friends, and significant other. And esteem, respect from others, status, public recognition. Yeah, I'm not so sure if this is important to me, status. That's overrated. Public recognition, Well, if you are in a marginal group, for example, being neurodiverse, yeah, then public recognition is not really there. And then a respect for self, sense of competence and confidence, which comes directly from actually public recognition. And then if public recognition is not there, you internalize that, and then sense of competence and confidence suffer. And self-actualization, reach of full potential. And you can never do that if public recognition is not there, judging you, calling you whatever, and you don't feel this inner competence, agency, confidence, but feel you are somehow dysfunctional, which leads directly into the next pyramid. So this is a little bit a different Maslow pyramid, and I couldn't find an English version of that, but I will just translate. So these are different trauma types that can happen in life to any person. And what we recognize as complex traumatic stress injury, this can be birth, but also the 4 birth traumas by Stanislav Grof. He described them very well. So already trauma can happen in the womb, during birth, and right during the birth process, the 4 stages. And then there is accidents and intentional man-made traumas. For example, your partner, if he is abusive or she is abusive, that can also be both. Women can also be abusive to their partner. Or if you have a boss, that can be traumatic. And then the physical trauma during operation. And then attachment traumas from your parents, what happened during your childhood. Psychological traumas, emotional traumas, family again, or spiritual traumas, which can also come from cults. But then on the other side, this is not so well known or recognized transgenerational trauma. So several generations, like grandparents who have been in the war. Social, cultural trauma. And then financial, like the economy collapses, stuff like that. And political trauma. I mean, during 2020, all that was traumatic to the whole world, right? That was politically oriented because suddenly governments told you what to do and how to behave. And if you were an exception, you were not treated so nicely. And people actually turned on you. That was interesting. Yeah, and obviously the environment around you. How is your life going? Are you content? Or is it very difficult? And I don't know why they mentioned spiritually twice. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, so all of that can be traumatic. And it's a lot. As for the social trauma, this is also, yeah, the culture around you, those two go together. So if you are different, then you are basically marginalized, excluded, often discriminated. And yeah, that does a number on you.
And as we look at the range of disorders and the compulsivity, that's what I like to focus on, that out of that shame base, another way to look at the crisis is to say that we're in a crisis of compulsivity, and that compulsivity itself is set up in family systems. That the initiation into compulsivity always takes place in families, and the way it takes place is out of some form of abuse, which in its initial sort of initiation was salvific. That is, I'm a workaholic because I can't deal with my feelings. I don't have any feelings of tenderness or feelings of dealing with my children, so I'd rather stay at work and be into the impersonal excitement of making money as opposed to the threatening intimacy of home and the getting close and the expressing feelings. But what happened to a person like that? Very early on, they got cut off from their feelings. Very early on, they got abused in some way so that they were not allowed to be who they were. If you look at this little chart over here, that if you think of this bottom block as you or me at birth, this is what we look like at birth. There's a private self and a public self. That is, there's a part that I experience of me under my skin, then there's a part of me that you experience. Or another way to say this is that this is the conforming self, the public self, and this is the actualizing self. This is the part of me that is individualized, this private self, and this is the part of me that conforms for socialization, if you will, or to survive. Now, by puberty, if you come out of what I'm going to consider normal kind of sexual scripting, see, which is already abusive. If you just come out of normalcy in our culture, although we're making changes and we're trying to become conscious of this, but you see a little girl is born, here's her private self, suddenly she laughs too loud and somebody says, don't act like that. You stop gurgling when you laugh, that's not ladylike. So this private self goes in, and this public self gets bigger as she pretends not to gurgle when she laughs in order to please mother or please daddy or please whoever. So constantly she's sacrificing her real self to this public self. She has to give up who she is to fit the script that the culture decided on as what makes a real woman. And it may not be like her at all. It may be an act that she has to play in order to adapt to survive. Okay? By puberty, look at how big the public self is as opposed to the private self. And let's say by midlife, that that private self is just a tiny little part of you. That most of you, or most of us, or whoever it is an act, is a performance. Or as somebody said, by this point you've become a human doing and not a human being. That your whole life is a performance and an act. It's an achievement. See, very early on, you go to school and you get grades and you achieve. And they measure you and they judge you. And if you don't meet the measurement or the judgment, that private self, which may be very different, which may be, you may hear a different drummer. There's never been another you. Who are we going to measure you by? See, what I want you to get right now, there's no such thing as normal. Because if somebody's normal, they're the norm. We got to compare everybody to them. If you step forward and say, I am a normal person, then every one of us have to be compared to you. That you are the measure and the standard by which all of us are measured. What I'd rather say is we miss the mark. The sorrow of not being a saint is that you're not functional. Is that by the time you get here, you're pretending like you're not angry when you're angry because that's dirty or that's not ladylike. Or you're pretending not to be sad when you're sad because that's not manly. And so part of you is frozen and split off and gone. Part of you is no longer functional. Your feelings. Or maybe way back here you were so you had such an authoritarian family struggle you were never allowed to think a thought. If you said something, somebody would say that's stupid or that's crazy or where'd you get a crazy idea like that? So what you learned to do was to adapt. You pretended like you didn't have any idea, and pretty soon, by the time you got to here, you quit thinking.
A good analogy that just comes to mind when I look at the smoke. So if you imagine several people sitting around the fire, but one or two people sit directly in direction of where the smoke blows. All the other people are fine, but the one or two people with the smoke in their face, they say, oh my gosh, this is unbearable, it stings my eyes, I cannot bear it, it's too much. But then all the other people, they say, we are fine. What's the matter? And then they might call those people that say they cannot bear the smoke as abnormal. That's our society, that's the state of our society in regards to neurotypicals without the smoke in their face versus the neurodiverse people who have the smoke in their face. Well, that's not very kind. It's actually gaslighting to call people abnormal when they clearly have smoke in their face, which is not bearable. You have to sit somewhere else. Removing yourself from the smoke in your face is actually the only option. How you feel comfortable. This would be a good example to put every so-called autism expert in front of the smoke of a fire and tell them to bear it, to sit there and be comfortable. Ha! Well, let's see how long they can endure it. I'm just sitting here having the smoke blowing in my face. And it stings in my eyes. So, okay. I have to change. sit. So, now I'm fine. Now I can enjoy that beautiful environment. In nature, I feel happy, relaxed, inspired, and from that, creativity springs forth. So beautiful. I love it. And I wish more people would just go into nature and be. Listen to the sounds, sense, and not do and running around, being busy. Just be. So recharging. This place here is like a little sanctuary. It's so peaceful. And then the whole nervous system just makes sigh of relief. Just bird sounds and nature. I just love it. Therefore, I always say, don't teach a camel to walk with a heavy load of straws on their back. Instead, remove all straws, in that case, smoke. Because if you force a camel to walk around with such a heavy load of straws, at some point the last straw will break the camel's back, right? And then you have a shutdown, freeze, burnout, all of that.
Straws off the camel's back. You need to find your own solutions. What works for you? Because there is no one size fits all.
I don't know if you can see the changes that have come over me in these last few days. I've been afraid that I might drift away. I've been telling stories, singing songs that made me think about where I came from, and that's the reason why I seem so far away today. Oh, let me tell you that I love you and that I think about you all the time. Caledonia, you're calling me, and now I'm going